Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4, the last 4 of the class. I believe I've got my stream set up well, and let me know if there's any audio issues, but fingers crossed. I've got this setup thing down, knock on wood. We have had trouble with setting up streams over the past 5 months, but anyway, I'm excited for this week, excited that we are at the end of the class because it's been an awesome experience. It's been really cool to see you guys learn, and yeah, I've been pumped for this particular stream. So welcome everybody, and let's see. We'll get right to what we always do is look back at the previous week, and the previous week was 21 homework submissions, which is 57 primitives, 22 Melvins, and 22 choice sculpts for 100 total sculptures made last week. I like to throw a little bit of stats at you because those are cool numbers. It's really fun to think that the CG Cookie community made 100 individual sculpts in a week's time. So that is pretty cool. Awesome. Thank you for the feedback about the audio and video being okay. And let's see, LJ Simpson, bummer. It looks like I'm not getting through my remote connection. Okay. Hope you guys get the stream, but okay, he's got it. Excellent. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, excellent activity still in the community. The thread is out of control. The communal learning is so obvious, and it is a thing of beauty. So so many first responders and advice givers. I typically check the thread multiple times a day, Monday through Thursday, and then Friday through Sunday. I've been checking a couple times a day, and I'm always late to the communication. So people, other members, you guys are diving in, answering people's questions, helping each other out, giving feedback, complimenting each other. It's just awesome. I can't think of a single person who even came close to being like a jerk in the community, in the particular thread. So, I mean, that's awesome. You guys are an amazing group of people. Just an incredible first class experience for me. So, excellent. Hands clapping for you guys. So, and thanks for that help too. You first responders answering questions. That is a big help to me. There are several people in the class, somewhere between like 30 and 50 like active people, and it can be hard for me to answer all those questions. So I really do appreciate the help. And then the last thing is grading is kind of weird. I've had to admit that, or come to that realization this week. Yeah, I'm not used to it. I'm not used to giving an objective letter grade to people. And it's just kind of weird. I'm afraid that I could have offended people. Like, I know that I could give like a C grade. So the way I worked this week was there were 3 parts of the homework assignment. There were the primitives, the Melvin, and the sculptures of your choice. And so if you did only the primitives, that like was a C, and then primitives and Melvin, or 2 of the things, would be a B, and then all 3 would be an A for the most part. And I felt bad because I gave some people B's and C's when it was very clear that they worked hard. They just didn't have the time. There's always, valid excuses for people in here, because it's not like high school where people are forced to take classes that they don't want to take. If you're in here, you want to be here, you want to put forth the effort, and that's not a question. But I don't know, I just felt weird about giving people C's and B's, and I don't want that to be discouraging to anybody. But I don't know. I got to figure out the grading. Maybe it's not fair to grade it that way. But I'm going to try and figure this thing out as we get into the classes. But just wanted to make sure I wasn't taking anybody off by giving C's, because everyone did an awesome job. That's also a big piece of this explanation. Everyone did an amazing job. They have been all 3 weeks so far. And the letter grade, I was not considering necessarily how much time you had compared to someone else, but just in general, how did the sculpture strike me in quality and completeness and things like that. But anyway, hope I didn't take anybody off with the grading. But if you've got suggestions, please let me know if there's a better way to go about grading. I'm all ears. So Matt, in the chat, you're saying giving an accurate grade can help us improve. That is definitely the idea. I'll tell this story in college. That I was taken back to this week when I was grading people. Like a bad grade actually is supposed to be very informative and shaping. You know, it's not supposed to be discouraging, but it's supposed to show you where you miss. And I remember in college, I took, especially art school at Full Sail, I took that very seriously. And I was crushing my classes, getting A's, which wasn't hard because I loved to do this. I was happily put in the work compared to like AP chemistry or geometry, you know, goofy stuff in high school I didn't care about. But in college, I took this game art class, and it was just like a primer on game art stuff. And I felt like I crushed it. I loved my asset. I got a lot of good feedback from my classmates, and I turned it in and I got a C. And I was really bummed because I was making like all A's. And I asked them why I got a C, and it was because I missed little technical things, like the object origin was not in the right place. The naming conventions were a little off, like I was missing hyphens or something, these little goofy things. And so it kind of ticked me off, but like once I calmed down, it was evident to me that those things were important, and I just didn't read the instructions. It was a silly thing, but it did inform me on why I didn't get an A. So ultimately it wasn't discouraging, but it was informative. So that is the idea. But anyway, we can stop talking about grades for now. But overall, like even when I did give people C's, like I wanted to make sure that the effort that I saw and the quality was, I think, an A for everybody. People are really doing good work in here, and it's evident that that's the case. So anyway, on to the, I believe, favorite submission stuff. Yeah, so I mean, what's not to love about Nathan Garduno's work here? I mean, it just struck me right away. Incredible finished result, frankly, and that you went way above and beyond with the lighting. But your sculptures are good. If I'm honest, I would say they're not leagues better than anyone else's, frankly. But what struck me was like the good lighting covers a multitude of sins, and even mid-range to like, I don't know, sometimes a bad model, not that any of these are bad, but lighting will just make it look good. It's amazing what lighting can do. So I just wanted to plant that seed with you guys. It's not at all required by any means in this course. It's beyond the scope of this course, but just wanted to show you and shine some light on the fact that these are good models. They're not fantastic models. Like the primitives, if I were to critique it, like it can use some sharper edges. They're a little bit bumpy. They are still very good. Melvin's very authentic. Love the sculpture. I love that character, this pink-haired character. Good sculpture, not mind-blowing sculpture, but with the light, oh my goodness, like that's just beautiful. So hopefully those seeds are planted as you progress in your modeling skill set. Be mindful of your lighting. I've known a lot of modelers who don't care about lighting, and so they're great modelers, but their models never look awesome in their reels. They never look awesome in their portfolio because they just like throw an ambient occlusion pass on it, you know, just poor lighting, and it doesn't do the model justice. So this is a great example of what lighting can do. So good job, Nathan. Really good job. Honorable mention goes to Matthew Ulray. I can't recall exactly what your experience level is coming in here, but this is pretty impressive sculpting to me. And I'm guessing that this candle was maybe from watching the realistic character course. I did a sculpt of a candle in there. And I remember someone challenging me in the live stream to sculpt the flame, which I thought was a pretty interesting concept to sculpt, you know, plasma or whatever a flame, you know, is technically composed of. And I just went real simple. It kind of stumped me, but I liked the concept. Well, here, that stuck out to me immediately, that your approach to the flame was really interesting. Stylized, but I don't know, giving it a little extra, and that was really cool. So great job with these sculptures. I love the details. It's very recognizable. Also, the jack-o'-lantern, really cool. That's a pretty interesting face design that you nailed very well. So awesome job. You're definitely worthy of some mention here. And finally, I want to shout out to the primitives because a lot of people did that. And I really like that exercise. I think that it teaches a lot, particularly in the polishing portion. Whenever you're trying to sharpen edges like this and get really, really flat, smooth surfaces, that's super easy to do with polygon modeling, but actually requires some significant effort, some surprising amount of effort when you get into sculpting. And there were several submissions. These are just 4 of them where you guys went in and took your time with the primitives. I even got some people saying like it was a little more informative than they expected. And so people who went in and really polished them off, like, good job. Hopefully it taught you some. It's impressive to me to be able to sculpt these shapes, even though it seems simple. But also Matsu in the bottom right, you, I believe, are the only one who took the feedback I gave and then did it again. So this is your second primitive submission. So yeah, I appreciate you going back and applying what the critique was about. So this is great. Yeah, awesome guys. Awesome job, guys, with the primitives. See if I'm missing any questions so far. Don't see anything. That's one nice candle. Amen to that. I went to school. Okay, cool. So loose ends. A couple things that I saw in the comments that I said I would do a demo of is Zolt mentioned bad dynamic topology geometry and how to fix it, or I was trying to help him give advice on how to fix it, but it was pretty hard to type out in text. And so I want to, he gave me the file, and I'm going to open that because you can get into some corners with dynamic topology in the way that the self-tessellation happens. So I want to show you how I go about fixing it. And then also polishing. That was something that I mentioned. I just mentioned it with the primitive shapes. And then it's this idea of, I compare it to like sanding a wooden shelf or anything you build out of wood. Like, you build the thing and it maintains the shape of the object, and then you sand, and technically you're changing the surface, but just slightly, that you're not actually changing the shape, but you are noticeably affecting it. And, you know, compared to rough wood, compared to sanded wood is a big difference to the touch. And that's kind of the idea with polishing a sculpture. You're not changing the overall shape, but you are, anything that should be straight, you're straightening out. Anything that should be a nice smooth curve, you're going in and removing the lumps, removing the wobbliness. And anyway, I'm going to demo that a little bit, hopefully shine some light on when I kept saying polishing and what that actually means. So with that, we'll jump into Blender. And I have your file open, and I believe I found the spot that you were talking about. I believe it's this one, this place right in here. If we jump back over to the, yeah, I believe that's the spot right in here, which is where the left leg is connected. And actually, when I tested this out earlier, this is not bad geometry. It's not the kind that I thought you were talking about. So this is simply intersection. And let me jump into sculpt mode on this guy. Switch over to my pen. And so the, let's see here. I'm going to hide OBS. I think it taking a little bit more computing power than I wanted. Also pause the stream. Okay, for me watching the stream. All right, so this is not bad geometry. If I go into wireframe view, it's just intersecting geometry, which is not bad because sometimes you want to just cram 2 pieces of geometry together because it creates the impression of surfaces being, you know, really tight together. But if you didn't want to do that, you could, like, I've just got my smooth brush on. Let me make sure that my strength is, okay, unified there. And increase the strength of my brush and just start smoothing down. And you'll see that the surfaces, you know, resolve themselves. And so now I'm not penetrating anymore, but it's not bad to do that. It's not uncommon at all to just come in here and let me go to subdivide edges so it doesn't necessarily update the geometry, even though it did there. Okay, let's go to like 10 pixels. Yeah, so that was a quick solution. If it really didn't even need to be solved, but yeah, I was just saying it's not uncommon at all to get some intersection. But what I thought you were talking about is genuine bad geometry, and let me show you what I mean. If I turn on wire and draw all edges. Okay, so sometimes when you're, especially, I mean, I'll go to subdivide collapse. I'll use a 5 pixel size relative detail. I'm going to go to my crease brush. I'm just going to, you know, like really exaggerate my strokes to get this bad geometry that I'm talking about. And so, let's see, I don't want to crash Blender though. Maybe I'll go to like 10. All right, so we're just going to I'm going to cut in the crease real deep, go to my inflate, start inflating this out, really smash the geometry together. I don't know, switch to clay strips. And I'm just trying to like tessellate new geometry while also sculpting on existing stuff. And you'll start to see that we create really, really bad geometry. By the way, I also forgot to mention during the stream last week that a key for navigating around the sculpture is you can, just like in object mode or edit mode, you can hit period on the number pad, and that will zoom and focus in on where you touch the sculpture last. So that is a crucial part. Someone mentioned in the thread that it's really cumbersome navigating around, but you know, focus on the last spot that you touched, and that will be your anchor for navigating. All right, so if we look at our wireframe, check out this geometry. It's absolutely terrible. It's intersecting at multiple points, and even though it can look okay in shaded mode without the wireframe, and I can even smooth in here, as you start to smooth, you get problems, and you start to see just how busted this geometry is. So the way that I like to fix this is, the key is stepping up your polygon size for the tessellation. So since I'm using relative detail, I'm going to increase my detail size to like 20. I'm going to use subdivide collapse, and just with like an inflate brush, I'm just going to touch it very lightly. I'm not actually trying to change the surface much, but just retessellate the geometry. And actually, let's go even higher than that, like 30 on the detail size. And actually, I'm holding control with the inflate brush to push this down. And if we turn on wireframe and draw edges, the big geometry is simplifying the problem geometry from before, and then go back to smooth, maybe touch it one more time, smooth, touch it one more time. And the new geometry has smoothed out, and it's big geometry, so like it's easier to smooth. And at this point, we have solved the bad geometry issue. So that workflow, when you have bad geometry, jump up your detail size or go in the direction to get big polygons and touch the area, smooth the area, touch it, retessellate, smooth. That's kind of the idea. But it's not terribly uncommon for that kind of thing to happen. You know, just but the nature of dynamic topology and retessellation, it can happen, but it's really quite easy to solve. That's the number pad period. Yeah, okay. Let's see if I'm missing any questions. Doesn't look like it. Okay, cool. Yeah, don't be shy, like ask your questions. Yeah, that's always a theme here. I love to answer them if I can. So, all right, now the next part of the demo I wanted to show is actually polishing this particular sculpture since I'm using it. And I'm going to enable, there's a big comment from Nathan. Let me read that real quick. I know it would be considered next steps, but I'm struggling getting over the mental hurdle of next steps after sculpting, like UV, texture paint, etc. Just can't grasp onto those lessons. It seems like there are a lot of ways of tackling that part, and it's hard for me to find a basic workflow after sculpting. Yeah, okay. So you are kind of getting to the next steps beyond even modeling. I'm trying to think how I can point you to some like courses, perhaps. If you can maybe post, like copy and paste this into the community thread, and I'll be able to maybe point you to some specific courses that I think would help with going beyond sculpting and creating a finished model that can even be rigged or animated or easily textured. Because we do have content on that stuff, but maybe it's just maybe it's a little more trouble to find. But yeah, if you can maybe copy and paste that into the community thread, I'll be happy to answer that and provide some links. So from Tomas, who's the best sculptor in Blender that you know of? Let's see, the best there are a lot of good ones. I don't know that I can say a best one definitively, but I know that Max Puliero is really, really good. He is a professional modeler and art and digital artist. He's in Japan. We did a blog post about him, an interview with him recently. So I'd recommend going to the blog and looking up Max Puliero. He is an amazing sculptor and someone who's using Blender in real world production, even in non-Blender pipelines. So he's a pretty inspirational Blender artist. Let's see, who else? Roberto Roch, I think, or Roche, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but he was really heavily involved in like the dynamic topology testing. I don't know if it was testing, but like he showed a lot of people what was possible with dynamic topology and a very gestural workflow when it came to sculpting. So he's awesome. I haven't seen too much from him in recent years, but that, you know, it doesn't mean he's not still one of the best sculptors who uses Blender. Nathan, I didn't actually answer your question really. I said that I'll need to paste some. I wanted to give you some links, some courses that we have that will help you. And that's kind of how I answered your question, but you didn't miss anything. So yeah, Tomas, Roberto Roche, I like Gleb Alexandrov. I think he's a good sculptor. Yeah, I've seen him do sculpting. He's kind of like all over the place. He uses modifiers. He models polygonally. He sculpts. He does everything in this mishmash amalgamation of a workflow. So he's a really good sculptor. Zacharias Reinhardt, he's been doing more sculpting. He seems to be doing pretty impressive things. And anyway, that's 4 off the top of my head. But I mean, there are a lot of good sculptors out there. Let's see, who is the lady that had some tutorials on CG Cookie? She does some interesting ones too. Yes. Oh my goodness. Why am I blanking on her name? Dolores? No, that's not it. That's not it. Oh, what is her name? We took her training down. We might put it back up, but we took it down, you know, with this idea that it was obsolete. But yeah, if anyone can remember her name, why can't I? I'm just blanking for some reason. But she did some. She's, I would say, like a more traditional sculptor who came into 3D. So she's got really insightful traditional sculpting approaches. And she's got a cool accent, so that makes her sound a little more legitimate than me. What was her name? Doris Fiebig. That was her name. Fiebig, I think is how you pronounce it. Doris, yes. Not Dolores, Doris. Yeah, she was really good. Very artistic type of sculptor. Thank you, Mark. So she was an artistic sculptor, very gestural, whereas I'm less gestural. I'm a little more, I guess, precise. I'm trying to get more gestural, but anyway. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to jump back to the demo and start talking about this polishing idea. And like the sanding, analogy, we're not really trying to change the meta shape, so to speak. We're just polishing it. And so the first place that I kind of go to is the top lip of the mouth. And if we look at the artwork down here, as a stylized character, everything is pretty simplified. Okay, so there's not a lot of wobbliness in any of the lines. They're all very clean, simple curves, simple shapes. And so when I look at the mouth, you know, we've got some things that push against that idea. It's pretty good for the most part, but then there's a little dip here. I'm exaggerating with my line, by the way. And then there's a sharp edge in the corner of the mouth. And so this particular quadrant or whatever, there's some things that push against the simplified nature of the shapes. And so I just want to smooth that out. And so I'm kind of looking at the silhouette of the mouth, and I can see this little lump. So let's simply bring it down, make it simple. There we go, that little lump pulled down. Maybe smooth this out a little bit. Follow down the length of the curve of the lip, and then here's a big one where it cuts up into the corner. Like that's a big area. Maybe I should change the color to like green. Okay, so that's a big one that I want to change. I want to make it much more like this. Okay, so a pretty big, substantial difference. So I'm going to bring down the corner and then clean up the wobbliness. So you'll hear those words a lot: bumps, wobbliness. Use my smooth brush. Just try and create a much cleaner, more refined curvature for the mouth. Okay, so it looks good from this angle, but then I look at different angles and it's not good. Another part of the wobbliness is the fact that the lip is not a consistent thickness, right? So it's It's pretty consistent right in here. So this area is fairly consistent. And then in the middle, it gets thicker. And then on the end, it's very, very thin. So we want to just make that consistent. And if I'm going to start in the biggest discrepancy, which is the thinner portion. And let me check. I see some questions, it looks like. Retopo, then maybe rig it if not animated. Okay, there aren't questions. All right, must be just conversation. Sorry. Don't mean to interrupt. Okay, cool. So yeah, back to increasing the thickness. Whoops. So right there, I'm using Subdivide Collapse, and it removed a lot of the detail unnecessarily. So let's change that to Subdivide Edges to maintain the detail that's already there, and just start buffing out the thickness of the lip on this side. And I am touching a little bit of the tooth in here. That's okay. I mean, I'll come back and it's okay because I'll come back and polish this. You know, in theory, I would come back and polish this later. So I buffed out that thickness. It pretty much matches the other side. Maybe it's a little too thick. And then in the middle, I'm going to use my grab brush and push the inside of the lip towards the outside to thin the lip. And now it's a much more consistent thickness. Maybe smooth these little bumps out. And, you know, the really fine level bumps, I'm not too worried about those. But like right here, we've got a pretty big dip, that little dent in the surface. And you can kind of see it as I rotate around. The matte cap kind of shows that off. But if I look down at this angle, it's really evident. So you can see that the surface, which should be simplified and round, dips down right in here. But then it's pretty smooth, you know, the majority of the circumference. So let's just fix those little divots. There we go. So one thing that's very true about polishing is it's not simply using the smooth brush for everything. That is far from what polishing actually is. The smooth brush is of course used, but it's not a quick one button fix. You're just trying to keep all your shapes consistent and smooth according to your artwork. Here I've lost some of the smoothness in the upper lip. So I just go back, kind of fix that. So the upper lip is much better, much closer to the artwork. But let's go around the rest of the head, or you know, a portion of the head, and keep in mind the silhouette. So look at the outer edge and how, you know, wobbly and kind of bumpy it is. You know, we want that to be a nice, smooth curvature. So let's simply, with my grab brush, I'm going to pull out, using kind of a big grab brush, pulling a lot of the flesh out, just trying to keep it nice and curvy as we go down the side. Okay, so that actually helped a lot. At least it helped from that angle, but if I start rotating around, we've got a problem. The horn kind of needs to come out a lot. And if I'm not mistaken, it's probably to match the artwork is part of the problem, which in my polishing, I've not been looking at the artwork from this angle. But yeah, I'm sure that that's why the horn was pushed down to try and match the artwork. So we have a couple options where I can maybe, well, let's see here. Let me think about this. How am I going to do this? Click on an empty layer. Okay. Let's see. So the mouth needs to... I don't know if I want to derail. So trying to make the sculpture match the artwork, that's not actually what I'm trying to demonstrate here. That's a kind of a whole nother subject. So I'm just going to stick to polishing. It's not going to match the artwork, but that's okay. In an ideal workflow, the meta shape, before you get to polishing, the meta shape will match the artwork, and the polishing doesn't really affect that. But in this case, we're a little off from the artwork, and so I'm just going to try and continue polishing the shapes. But it's going to be a little off. But just orbiting around, paying attention to silhouettes, that's how it's very apparent where there's, you know, like a dip. And, you know, right in here, just take out that dip. So with my grab brush, Let's pull that dip out. And, you know, this is fairly tedious, I imagine, is your impression of this part, but that's okay. It's going to look better in the end. It's going to look more consistent with the artwork, and it's going to look finished, right? It's not going to look like we stopped halfway through and just got tired of it. But it's not rocket science. You know, it's fairly simple, repeated tasks, and that's kind of all we're doing. I've hardly used the smooth brush, but once I pull the shape out with the grab, then we'll start smoothing it out. And right in here, we need a lot of work. There's a ridge. It's pretty bad. But okay, so about half hour in, I might let that be the demo. If you have more questions about polishing, let me know. Feel free to ask those, and I can further expound. But hopefully, you've seen that it's a repeated, just, you know, simplification, straightening lines that need straight, curving, you know, silhouettes that need curving, and getting rid of wobbliness and bumps. That's kind of the idea. All right, I think I missed maybe a question or two. Let me go down and find them. Let's see. One question that I've had watching previous streams is let me highlight that, is if you would add another object in your model when you want more clay, adding a sphere, for example, for eyeballs, or would you just add it with a blob brush? Yeah, good question. So kind of deciding when to use new geometry and when to just build it out of the same piece, the same single lump of clay, so to speak. Let's see. So a couple thoughts off the top of my head is, if I'm doing a dynamic topology sculpture that's more detailed. So this is not a terribly this is not a terribly detailed creature to be sculpting. And so it doesn't really need many other pieces. I might sculpt the teeth separate, just because you know, doing the sculpture and maintaining these sharp edges can be cumbersome. So if you add them separately, you can just not worry. You can trust that this connection is always going to look tight, and like a tooth is actually sitting in the gum, not that a tooth is being, you know, pulled out, because that can, you know, this little highlight right here, that can ruin the effect. And so that's an example where in this sculpture where I might sculpt the object separate. But in general, this is a pretty easy sculpture to do out of one piece of clay. If you watch the realistic character course, I do several different dynamic topologies pieces in there. And the reason that I remember primarily is that it was a very detailed sculpture, is realistic, and there was a lot of detail that I wanted, even in the dynamic topology stage. And so it was, so if you imagine your, basically, your computer will slow down if the piece that you're sculpting is super high resolution. But if you imagine dividing your object into several pieces, it will be, even though the same amount of geometry is in your scene, dynamic topology will be able to process faster if the object that you're working on specifically is lower resolution. So I feel like that came out really, really strange. But if I've got, okay, let me do it this way. If you've got a sculpture that's all that's made out of 5 pieces, all of which are 1,000,000 polygons each, okay? That means total in your scene, you've got 5,000,000 polygons. But when you're sculpting on one piece at a time, that means it's going to be faster, especially faster compared to if you had one mesh that was 5,000,000 polygons. Does that make sense? So in that way, if I need to create a dynamic topology sculpture with a lot of detail, I will cut it up into pieces just so that Blender can handle the high resolution more efficiently. I hope that came out, that felt like it came out really confusing. Hopefully that was understandable to you guys. Looking for other questions. Okay, so you guys are just sort of helping each other out. This is great. Okay, yeah, I don't think I missed anything else. I typically do eyes as a different object, mostly because I don't like to sculpt eyes, since eyes are like perfectly round. it's just frustrating trying to sculpt that, you know, sort of like the primitive exercise. If you always had to sculpt a round object, that would be annoying. But in just a couple minutes, you can create a sphere, inset an eye, inset an iris, and a pupil very quickly, and then just throw that into the sculpture. So that's much more quick approach to an eyeball creation. It's much more less of a hassle, I guess, than sculpting an eyeball. But okay, cool. All right, so yeah, that was the demonstration of polishing and fixing bad geometry. I'm going to go back now to our presentation. Let's see where we're going from here. All right, so those were the loose ends. And okay, so that's actually just looking back at week number 3. I hope that was a fun week for you guys. I did want to make it challenging, give you a lot of homework, you know, assignment to do. And I got some feedback that even in the chat today that it was difficult, but fun. And so it sounds like maybe like sculpting clicked for a lot of you guys the way that it clicked for me, guys and girls. And so that's cool because I love sculpting and I love to see other people love sculpting. Awesome. So extremely tough from Nathan. But it's funny, like even a lot of the people, you guys who said it was tough, like I could not tell that at all from the sculpture. The quality was really good and it seemed to be tough, but it seemed that you guys put in the effort and got it eventually, which is awesome. So yeah, to commend you guys, I could not tell visually just by looking that it was a struggle for you guys. So, or it was tough, but hopefully it was rewarding. And so yeah, so now what do you do? What do you do as a modeler at this point? Where do you go from here? And probably not going to love the answer, but it's cliche. But you have the tools now, okay? So this is just a beginner getting started with modeling in Blender. But the reality is you have the tools you need to create kind of anything, to model anything. And even with just the essential tools, that you don't use all the tools yet. And frankly, I don't use all the tools in Blender. There are a lot of modeling tools that I've never used. I mean, I would even guess maybe as high as 50% of the modeling tools I've never touched. They're there and they're great, but you don't need all the tools. That's what I'm trying to explain. You have the essential tools now that you can just start to make stuff. You can go and make stuff, and this translates into practice. Okay, practice absolutely makes perfect at this point. Now that you know the tools, you know sculpting tools and you know modeling tools. So that's where you're going this week, and that's where I'm pushing you to go after this week and to develop your modeling in general further. And so an official place to go is the Modeling in Blender Learning Flow. I'm sure several of you are at least familiar with this. Let's go to find that for you. And oh, hey, look at that. My hair course is back. Huh. Nice. That's a pretty old course, but the hair system hasn't changed much. So I think we deemed it relevant. Anyway, so yeah, go to cgcookie.com, Blender 3D, Learning Flows, and right here, the Modeling in Blender flow is our curated from beginner to advanced learning path, so to speak, of what courses to take in what order. And so you've already done modeling with modifiers, you've done fundamentals of digital sculpting, and where I would push you to go educationally with pre-recorded curriculum is to go here and start working your way through these particular courses. That said, this is a generic learning flow in that it's kind of aimed, it's meant to be welcoming to everybody. But since you're taking the class, you get a little more of my personal recommendation. I want to give you an alternative suggestion, and that is to focus on one at a time and then come back to the other. Focus on mesh modeling and then focus on sculpting, because they are pretty different and they're pretty expansive in themselves as separate kind of skill sets. And some of you have mentioned, I've seen a comment already today that it is very different. Sculpting was a very different path than mesh modeling, and that's true. And so the modeling in Blender learning flow does both of them kind of simultaneously, and that's great. Some people learn well that way. I found that for myself, it really, really helps to separate and focus. All right, and I want to use this analogy that if you've got mesh modeling in a box, okay, and sculpting in a box, they're two pretty heavy boxes because they're dense skill sets. Take a lot of practice and time to perfect. So you can pick both boxes up at the same time and move forward. You'll move slowly because it's very heavy, and it will be cumbersome for you to move that way, but technically you can do it. However, if you just take one box at a time, you'll move faster, and it will be less cumbersome of a journey. So like that's kind of my analogy to suggest maybe focus on mesh modeling for a couple months. Just do that straight through. We have a lot of courses on that. And then come back if you did like sculpting and do sculpting for a couple months. That would be maybe my approach that I would recommend, that I would want to do myself. So if you want to focus on mesh modeling, these are the courses that I recommend. Yeah, I saw from Mark, less frustration also. That is absolutely true. Back in the day when I was learning, sculpting wasn't really around. I might have already said this before in the stream, but sculpting wasn't around, and so I was learning mesh modeling, all the technical things of extrusion and edge loops and triangles versus quads. I was learning all of that techie stuff along with how to just make the shapes that I wanted. And it was so frustrating. Like it took me a year of like trying to figure that stuff out at the same time. But now with sculpting and retopology, I get to separate the tech stuff from the sculpture and the art. And that is so much more satisfying to me. It creates better. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off the topic. I'll talk about retopology in a little bit. But yes, to be able to separate them and focus is how I have been able to develop my personal like skill and workflow, and it's been way better for it. So if you want to focus on mesh modeling, I kind of picked the mesh modeling specific courses out of the Blender learning flow. The Blender modeling learning flow. And Introduction to Hard Surface Modeling, this is from Jonathan Williamson, creating a simple plane. And it's a really, really fun design. It's a fun course. It's a great introduction. And Jonathan Williamson, he doesn't really teach anymore, but like if those of you who have seen his tutorials, like he's a master. He's amazing. So you're going to learn a lot in that one. Creating a wall of mailboxes, that's one that I did. And it's kind of a quick project-based thing, like from nothing to a final render as quick as possible. So it actually does incorporate a lot more than modeling. It goes into shading and texturing and stuff. But maybe test your comfortability with that one. It will push against your boundaries, especially if you've only been modeling. And then modeling and animating a sci-fi hatch. This one's really interesting. It's by, I believe it's who is that? Nuts. Who did that one? He's really good. Chris Kuhn, yeah, amazing modeler, amazing technical mind, and like mechanisms and machinery. He's one of the best at that. So this one will teach you a lot about modeling for kind of animation, for motion, and kind of open your mind to like how to build a model with an intention, like an end goal being like animation. So that one's really interesting. And creating a jellyfish, this is similar in that it's a quick project as the wall of mailboxes. So you go through some different approaches to modeling. I use a lot of cloth simulation for the purpose of modeling, not for animation, but just to create these things. And that one's actually come back recently. It's an older course, but still like relevant information. And so yeah, that one's a fun one. I was happy with the result. Getting a jellyfish kind of thing was fun. You use some interesting shaders, but some non-conventional modeling approaches in that one to just further expand like what you can do with modeling and how you can create shapes. And then modeling a post-apocalyptic vehicle. That's Jonathan Williamson again. He this vehicle that's kind of zombie. In a zombie world that's armored and has some weapons on it and stuff. So this one's, as far as I remember, it's very straightforward. I better double check. Let's see if there's any sculpting chapters. I can't remember if there were. Brushman. No, it doesn't look like it. Yeah, so it's just straight modeling. Kind of the pure polygon modeling approach. So That one's a fun one. It's a pretty detailed model, so it's getting into the advanced realm. And then modeling a motorcycle is another one from Chris Kuhn, and it's pure polygon modeling. And the reason that I kind of say that with surprise is I don't see that happening too often anymore, especially a shape like this that has I mean, yeah, sure, for like the sprockets, I think that's what it's called, but the the round wheel and stuff like that's polygon modeling, but the body shape is very what I call organic hard surface, like very smooth flowing lines, not straight edges and stuff. So usually I would prefer to sculpt that and then retopologize it, but he does it all with polygon modeling. So really, really cool course, a lot of details, and he's a master at it. So yeah, so those are the courses I recommend for mesh modeling as your focus if you want to go that route. And then for sculpting, I recommend starting with The Art of Sculpting. That's a collection of courses. We'll go look at that one. But it's like several courses in one, to be honest with you. And there's no retopology, there's no anything other than sculpt mode and creating geometry. Creating shapes with brushes, artistic, intuitive method of sculpting. And so it's just designed to get you used to that world. And yeah, so it's very artsy. It's fun, I think. And so a lot of chapters in there. Recommend that one first. And then Introduction to Retopology. So Retopology, I'm going to talk about it at the end, but it's the bridge between mesh modeling and sculpting. And it is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful workflow. So I introduced that into the sculpting because it really does become, unless you want to be a pure sculptor, a pure digital sculptor, and those people do exist, it's not terribly common, I would say. Most often, as a digital sculptor, needs to be usable as creating animation-friendly meshes and things like that. And so because that's the majority, understanding retopology is super important. And so I introduce you to that in the second course, or it's actually Jonathan Williamson, he teaches that. And then hard surface sculpting and retopology, that's a combination. I do the sculpting and he does the retopology. But that is challenging your sculpting ability or your sculpting conventions in going for a hard surface thing. Because, this kind of blurs the lines. I've described mesh modeling as being man-made, like, your computer, your desk, your guitar, your lamps, like these are man-made objects. And those are, I've used to typically describe as being mesh models. But you can also sculpt some really intricate shapes because these shapes in this gun are pretty funky. Like they're not easily created from box modeling. And so you can sculpt these shapes, and you can see the progression in this image right here. You can sculpt the shapes and then retopologize it. And so retopology becomes a key theme because all four of the last courses involve sculpting and retopology. And then creature modeling. So we go from hard surface sculpting, and then I take you back to organic modeling, creating a creature, sculpting it from a concept. I think I just saw something about concept. Let me look over here in the chat. I think I'm missing some questions. Let's see. Sorry, guys. I started talking and kind of get off a little bit. I don't think I see any questions down there. Okay, from Tomas, concept artists also don't do retopology, I think. Yeah, maybe so. So when I mentioned sculptors, like pure digital sculptors, those people, no, they typically don't go to retopology. They just do a sculpture, they do a pretty render, or maybe they prepare it for 3D printing. When I was at Real Effects, we hired a sculptor, Matteo Delafino or something like that. He was like an Italian guy, I think, but he did concept sculptures where we would give him 2D art and he would concept sculpt them and then give us renders back. And it was, I don't know, it was no modeling pipeline involved. He just sculpted. He went to a coffee shop, sculpted, got paid a ton of money to do this. But he would be considered a concept sculptor. We gave him artwork and he simply sculpted it and then he was done. He didn't take it. He didn't do any of the work to make it production friendly. And so those people do exist, and I mean, he at least makes decent, makes good money. But I don't know how common it is. I don't know how high in demand concept sculptors are yet. Usually, you're more valuable if you know how to turn that into a production model. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but I love that you guys are answering each other. You're having your own conversation. If I have missed your question, maybe go ahead and post it again. I want to answer your question. So, yeah, we talked about creature modeling. That was actually the first course I did for CG Cookie. Like they contracted me to make that course. There was a course before that they found me through, but this was the first course I made specifically for CG Cookie. Whoops, let's go back. Next one is modeling a sci-fi helmet. We jump back to this hard surface sculpting thing and use sculpting as a concept tool. Like I don't give you any artwork. It's the idea of just kind of kit bashing this model into existence. And it's a very powerful creative tool to get unique shapes. That's not just dependent on someone else giving you artwork. You can go in and use hard surface sculpting techniques to build something unique. And that one's sculpting and then retopology, turning it into a finished model. And then finally, modeling realistic characters. We bounce back to organic. So we go hard surface, organic, hard surface, organic. And this one is creating a very high resolution, high frequency detail sculpture of a human character. It is based on artwork, but it shows you kind of the pipeline of a modeler, of a character modeler, sculpting initially and then retopologizing it, and then actually sculpting further detail on the retopology through multi-resolution. So it's a good combination of different techniques to maximize the detail that you can get in Blender. Okay, so that's kind of splitting up, giving you some unique focuses, a unique path to further your learning, at least by watching education. And cool, I'm seeing some people who like the sci-fi helmet course, and the last one is a fascinating course, the modeling realistic characters, I think you mean. So awesome, I'm glad you guys are enjoying those. Question, as far as sculpting goes, from Matthew Ulray, with different versions of dynamic topology through the years, has the tool become more or less difficult, complicated to use? That's a good question. I mean, more options have been added over the years. It hasn't changed in the last few versions, but when it first came out, like it only had, let me go back to Blender. When it first came out, if I recall, it only had relative detail, I think initially, and it had subdivide edges and subdivide collapse. Collapse edges was added later, but getting new options can technically make it a little more complex. But they're really good options, and thankfully, I say thankfully, it hasn't had to change much over the years. So even though some of the training that I recommended, if we go back here, one of the things about making online training is as soon as you post it, it starts to age, and that sucks because the information ages a lot less quickly. But the wrapper around it, like the fact that we stamp on the course, Blender 2.72, like as soon as the next version of Blender comes out, the impression is that it's obsolete. And it's an exhausting effort to like remake all our courses and try and stay on the cutting edge just so that we can put on, the right label of Blender. So an effort in this course is also to give you guys a place. Like I'm gonna do courses in the future. I'm very well might do a like modeling realistic characters class. I said courses. I'm gonna do many classes in the future, and I'll use old courses and be able to answer those questions for you. That how dynamic topology has changed from when it was recorded to now, and you can trust us that we are going to have a cutoff when content becomes obsolete, but as long as the workflow and the theory behind the education is relevant, we would rather clarify how the tools change rather than go through the very expensive, time-consuming process of re-recording a course. So to answer your question, the content that I provided, that I've suggested here, dynamic topology hasn't changed that much. Tomaz, you say that must be frustrating. I've grown over the years. I've grown to definitely find it frustrating. Be a little transparent for you. I mean, like our production value, this is kind of a weird thing, but like our production value over the years keeps going up. Like to give you an idea of what production looks like now, we R&D the topic, like for a big course, like for example, the robot modeling course that came out, I think in the summer. That was the last real big course that I did. And I spent like a month R&Ding game dev techniques because I have been around them, but I've never actually done them. So to teach them to you, I wanted to really know what I was talking about, do my research. Took a solid month of figuring out a workflow. And then it takes another solid month and a half to actually record all the lessons. And then I pass it off to Matthew, a professional. And before he worked for us, he was a professional video editor. And he edits all the video down. And then we go through the publishing process, which is a whole nother thing in itself. Anyway, it was 3 months to create that course. And the way that we have done things, we kind of have, in the past, we were like a blog related kind of site. And so with blogs, it's like new content all the time. And so we created this precedent of like new. And so that course that took 3 months of everything I had, I was actually really proud of that course. It showed up, it was on the radar for like a month, and then it just kind of disappears. And that's real frustrating. It's already done with an older version of Blender, I think. So anyway, to your point, I don't know why I felt like being that transparent with you guys. But yeah, it was very frustrating. So it's already burned out Tim and Jonathan Williamson. And so unless I'm going to be burned out too, like we needed to do something different. And then classes came along, and I think it's just going to be a much better solution for teaching that, or for getting the most out of that same content. I'm not going to be done recording courses or anything, but until like something comes along that makes sculpting obsolete or makes mesh modeling completely obsolete, that theory doesn't really change. It's not really changed for me in 10 years. So anyway, like there's not much real reason to re-record that stuff over and over. So anyways, yeah, I'm sorry about that. That was kind of a big rabbit hole. But yeah, Grady, I mean, I saw you said the principles don't change, but the tools do. That's how you say it in just a few words. Exactly. All right. So yeah, I've told you about the sculpting focus if you want to go that direction. And next, so this actual week's agenda, we're already about an hour in, and well, I'll start wrapping it up. But the week 4 agenda, I want you to pick your poison and practice. I want you to choose mesh modeling or sculpting, or both. You're welcome to do that, even though I would do mesh. I would choose one, isolate it, and focus on it. You know, maybe you probably could be better than me, and so you have a more capable mind, and you can do both. Regardless, I recommend I recommend focusing, and that's kind of the goal. Pick something this week, and then the homework, model something, an object that's beyond your current skill set, something that's a challenge to you. So, if you've sculpted Melvin for the first time, maybe try sculpting the Wrangler or a character similar to that, something with more detail, more pieces. If you've mesh modeled, I'm trying to think, we did a coffee cup, a wheel. If you've done something like that, maybe try wow, I can't talk. The mailboxes. Wow, the mailboxes. Try that one. That's heavily on modifiers and kind of creating a scene. It's a little more complex than the stuff you've learned so far. The jellyfish scene, that is definitely going to be more complex. Or don't do something away from our training. Like do something that you just want to do. Try and model a vehicle, for example. Try to model, I don't know, like a guitar amp is sitting right here. So try and model that. Like do something that is beyond your skill set, challenge yourself. But I also want to say, think about how long it'll take you to do. You've been working all month. You should have a feel for yourself how long it's taking you to build things. So in other words, if you've just built a coffee cup, don't set your goal this week to be a transformer from the movie that has 100,000 pieces to it or something crazy. Don't do that. That's not going to be accomplished in a week. And so take this week to practice thinking about organizing your workflow and how much time it will take. Yeah, so that's the challenge this week. I'm putting a lot on you to choose that for yourself, because there's a philosophy behind that, and I said it in my Piero course, that at the end of the day, you are the only one that you can depend on to make your creative ambitions a reality. So you can't rely on training to hold your hand all the way to being hired. Like if you want to be professional or be the best modeler that's out there, training is not going to make you do that. It will give you a kick in the butt, point you in a direction, and get you started well. But hopefully, I hope I've done that in the first 3 weeks, trying to give you very specific things to do. But in this last week, I want you to take some control over what you want to create. So that's the whole point of the challenge for this last week. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with. I look forward to seeing, it'll be a good exercise to see how much can you bite off in a week and accomplish it. What's going to be too big for you, or what can be achieved with a lot of effort. So anyway, I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Some closing thoughts before I get into that. Let me just check the chat one more time. Can't wait for the next class. I'm glad. I'm going to announce when I'm doing that and what it's going to be. Sign me up for that. Oh, let me see here. I missed some things. Question as far as sculpting goes. Okay, I answered that. The principles don't change much. Okay. Yeah, it seems like you guys you hear what I'm saying. I appreciate that about the tools changing, but the underlying techniques, not so much. They will over time, I guess, depending on how technology goes, but in the last 10 years, yeah, it's not really changed. So, I remember maybe I'm not seeing questions. Okay, cool. Awesome, guys. You're incredible. This class it'll be really memorable for me. It couldn't have gone a better experience. You guys have been incredible. All right, so the closing thoughts, 2 R's. All right. Grady, I believe you mentioned in the community that I have yet to mention reference. And that's true. And so I wanted to close with that as I try and push you out the door to challenge your own boundaries as a modeler and develop them further. Reference is going to be crucial for you. It's going to be your Bible for anything that you model. I remember as a kid, this takes me back to my drawing days. I drew all the time growing up, and I always drew exactly what something else was. Okay, so for example, when I was in, whenever Ocarina of Time came out, we had the guide, and I would for like a year just draw some of the things that I saw in there. Like exactly, I wanted to copy it, but not actually put the paper on top of it. But I would literally just copy it. That's what I did for years and years outside of Ocarina too. But like that was an example, and there was very little. Like I used to think that I was not a great artist yet because I had to copy it. But one day I would be able to draw whatever I wanted without a single bit of reference. Like that was my measurement for being a good artist. And that's ridiculous. It's not true at all. You have to have reference unless you're doing purely abstract, random things. Like you have to have reference. It's your safe place. It's no one can. If I told you, you've seen a lot of cars in your life, and I told you model that car perfectly. Model a Toyota Celica. I don't know why that came to my mind. I think that's a Toyota Celica. Like model that perfectly. Go. No one would be able to do it. Even if you've owned a Celica for years, you don't know where all the nuts and bolts are. You don't know exactly how far the license plate comes up in relation to the rear lights. Like little things like that. You can't know that. So maybe I'm talking to the wall and no one actually thinks you don't need reference. But the fact is I had to admit to myself, reference for everything. So I may be beating a dead horse. Reference is super important. And I wanted to take a moment to kind of, since this is such an important thing, just to say it might not be enough. So maybe I'll just do a quick little demo of kind of how I go about searching for reference. I've mentioned a car a couple times. So whether you use Google, let's stick with the Toyota Celica. And yes, it is a Toyota, glad. Google Images is your friend. Yeah, see that in the chat. It is definitely your friend. It's not your friend if you want to sell what you make with it. So yeah, you can use Google, and I do use Google a lot. So you can, I mean, this isn't new to anybody, but look up images, and you can do that through Google. But working for CG Cookie, we can't just take images from Google. This stuff is copyrighted, and if we do that, the people who own it can totally sue us. So I have gotten really apt with Creative Commons images. So I'm going to go there. If you go to CC search, these are safe images to use for whatever purpose. And you can choose different sources here, whether it's Google Images or YouTube for video, Pixabay. I find that Flickr usually provides the most search results. And so let's say Toyota Celica. Let's see if we have many of those. And again, this is if I'm trying to model a Celica. Then we come to the fact of like, oh yeah, well there's multiple models of Celica. So which one do I actually want? Let's say this one looks pretty cool. Supra. Maybe I can just call it Supra. But what you're looking for is consistent imagery. It doesn't have to be the same color, but you need the same model of Celica. You need big images. That's what I also like about Flickr. If we look at this, a lot of these are just photos taken from people. And so you get massive original resolution. So 4,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. Like that is going to be amazing for modeling because you can zoom into all these little details. And so the bigger your image, the better. That's one criteria for your reference imagery. Find a lot of references from every angle. Find it from the back, from the 3/4 side. Maybe not the bottom. You can maybe make that up. How often do you actually see the bottom of a car? But yeah, just be very thorough with the type of image that you find. I mean, it's not uncommon to find 20, 30 images for one single model. Oh, it looks like Kaj has to bail. See Kaj, you're a long-term member and you took one of my workshops, so I like you, dude. But have a good one. And yeah, so back to the reference stuff. Big images, multiple angles. A big collection is good. The more reference will never hurt. And then also, you'll learn how to, again, for searching for reference, you'll become a master internet searcher. So if we just type in Toyota Celica blueprint, let's see if we get, oh yeah, we do get some. Excellent. So this is Google Images. So I, technically couldn't use this for a course, but this is perfect because it gives you a wireframe of the car that you're after. Now it's a small resolution, which kind of stinks. Let's see if we can make it bigger. Tools, larger. Okay, so we do have some larger ones. Excellent. Yeah, so you might actually have to buy this one. It looks like it's copyrighted or whatever. But this one doesn't. Nice. Yeah, so it's not a massive image, but that's plenty big enough. This would work great in Blender to model your orthographic views. But yeah, like learning terminology like blueprint, thinking outside the box when you search, that's how you're going to get your best references. And then, so yeah, I feel like I'm teaching stuff that's pretty obvious to you guys, but just in case you weren't used to using reference, yeah, don't be afraid to strengthen that skill set because you're going to need it. So that was the first R of my closing thoughts. And the last one is retopology. I mentioned it several times because it is such a crucial tool in the sculptor's tool set. And basically, if you're not familiar with it, please watch the intro course that's available right here in the modeling learning flow. It's an excellent primer and introduction to retopology as a concept, as a skill. But what it essentially does, if that term doesn't make sense to you, is it's a way to get the shape, take the shape of a sculpture, and then I would say pretty easily get a good model that maintains that shape. That's the whole idea of retopology, and it's like tracing a wireframe, a mesh wireframe over top of the model. And like I said, you get the shape for free. So you don't have to worry about shape while you're retopologizing, and you also get to focus purely on the edge flow, how clean and crisp your model is, how clean and crisp the mesh of your model is. And let's see, so that, like, I had planned to do maybe a little quick demo of Retopology. Would you guys want to see that? If not, you know, like, maybe we can call it an early day. I don't want to teach you something you already know, but or just lightly touch on. It's not really teaching. That's a little too extreme. Is it worth, so Zolt is asking, is it worth it to start the basic shapes with the grease cut tool at Sculpting? Yeah, so I love that method. I use it a lot in the, I use it really heavily in this course right here, modeling a sci-fi helmet. Yeah, so I even have a picture of it right here. So this is me using the grease cut to rough out shapes, and I love that method. I don't think I'm a big idea person. Like, I'm not a concept artist. I'm not good at thinking up cool, unique characters or designs or anything like that. So the grease cut allowed me to really just draw random shapes and then get something cool at the end of it. So yeah, I love that method personally. I'd love to see a demo. Okay, cool. Yes. All right. Time-saving retopo tips are welcome. Okay. Gotta go. Thanks for the class. I really enjoyed the streams. Thank you, Tomas. Thanks for being here. Yeah, well, before you leave, like, come back in March. That's when the next class is going to be. But awesome. All right, see you guys. Okay, yeah. So I'll just do a quick run through of topology, retopology, and then we'll end with that. But I'll just do it with this guy. Why not? It is an organic retopology, so that's a little bit different than. It's actually significantly. Some of the things are significantly different than doing a hard surface retopology. But for this character, you know, doing a retopology will be quite simple. Another good thing about retopologizing a character like this is I can keep my geometry broad and get a very smooth result at the end of it. Whereas like sculpting, you know, like all these little bumps and stuff, especially in here, a retopology will maintain that meta shape and it will just be smooth as a baby's bottom. So really, really useful retopology example here. So I'm going to add a plane. I like to leave my plane at the center of the origin of the world. So that's Alt-G, just moving that down. And tabbing into edit mode, this is my typical way to start. But select everything, Alt-M, and merge at the center for one single vertex. You can see that moving off to the side over there. And then from here, we enable snapping, which allows us to trace the wireframe onto our model. And so Deborah is asking, what is the grease cut tool? Grease cut tool. I don't know if I want to open that can of worms. So the grease cut tool is an add-on that, oh man, I need to do a whole stream about this because it's an amazing tool, but a lot of people have had problems with it because the developer doesn't actively maintain the add-on anymore. But if you want to, so it's kind of hard to answer in one quick thing. But if you go to this course, I use it extensively there. I'd recommend watching it. Maybe if it's beyond your, you know, like current skill level, like just watch it to kind of figure out what that is. But I do it pretty early on. Let me see if I can find specifically what lesson. Okay, yeah, right from the beginning, we get into the add-on, Intro to Sculpt Tools UI, and forming basic shapes with it. So start there, and you'll find out pretty quick what the grease cut tool is. Yeah, okay, cool. So retopology, I've created my single vertex, and we've enabled snapping, but I want to use face snapping. This is what's going to allow us to put it on the surface of our object. You can see it moving wherever my mouse goes. I actually don't like it following my mouse so closely. So I like to turn off snap onto itself and turn on project onto other objects. For some reason, this allows me to move it and it stays away from my mouse wherever I start the movement. So it just makes that a little clearer for me. And so I've snapped my vertex. You can see that no matter where I move it, it's snapping onto the surface. According to the projection of my camera, the viewport camera, viewport perspective. All right, so let's just start. You know, This is an asymmetrical model, and just for an example, like it'll stay asymmetrical, but if it was symmetrical, then I usually start in the middle because I can get the other side for free. And so I'm just gonna start like that here and start extruding. Oh yeah, so what am I doing? How am I creating these new verts? It's just extruding. So if I select a single vert and hit E, the extrude tool, like you can extrude a vertex one by one. Also, you can hold Control and then right click for me because I'm using left click select, right click and you'll add a new vertex extrusion wherever you just clicked. And so you can quickly just generate this loop around the mouth. And gosh, that's so nice compared to if you had to box model that. It's so nice just to quickly create this shape. And then I'm creating essentially a face by making corresponding verts. Why can't I see that? I can't, why can't I see my grease cup? Or my grease pencil? I'm confused. Anyway, these two verts correspond, these correspond. So this allows me to create a face. And you can't really see it right now because the mesh is, intersecting the sculpture. So if I want to see that, what we can do is turn on X-ray, and then, well, you can do that by itself, and then your mesh will always be seen over top of the non-X-ray meshes. You can do it that way, and you can see we're creating some faces now. And retopology depends heavily on this idea of edge flow, which edge flow is kind of academic, like book smart, in that you know it and you know what works and you know what doesn't. And so, like this sort of radial shape around the lips makes the most sense. And so that's something you learn with experience, and we teach it in our courses, but it's called edge flow, and it will allow you to make animation-friendly meshes. Like this radial shape allows the mouth to move much more naturally than a non-radial shape. Let's just say that. There is some topology that is bad, but a radial shape should make the most sense even to an inexperienced retopologizer. But so I mean, very simply, around the eye, that's another edge flow thing where we're going to encircle it because that's the best for animation. That's kind of what's driving me to do that. And so easily we can just create a bunch of geometry. Very clean, very efficient topology. And that is essentially what retopology is all about. Whoops. Select everything, hit Control N to make our normals consistent. I want to do another couple rows. We don't have to go one by one either. Like if we know that we want this radial shape here to extend out like this, we can extrude it, pull the whole thing out, scale it up, do it again. And we're getting that snap to the surface. It's like we're literally tracing it. So it's an amazing workflow that makes our lives so much easier. Getting the shape for free is a huge deal in my book. So, we've created this shape, and then we can hide our sculpture. And then when we smooth it, Control 2, let's see, also make it smooth shading. Like, look how smooth and, perfect that is. Maintaining the same underlying shape, but just getting that smoothness, much more optimized geometry. So that's a very, very quick and dirty demo of retopology, but that's the core concept of it. And let me see if I'm missing any questions. How do you fill it so fast? Thank you. I did not explain that. Filling it is with the F key. So if I create 4 connected verts, I can select them and hit F to fill. Also, if you have a ring of edges like this, corresponding edges, let's stop it right there. You can fill the first one and then just fill like that. It's smart enough to see that you want to go, why is my grease pencil? Oh, why is it not showing? I don't know. Weird. But this direction, it's smart enough to go that direction on its own. Once you like tell it where to start, kind of thing. But yeah, that's just the F key. Alternatively, if you do a lot of retopology, I'm going to highly recommend that you enable the F2 add-on, which should be there by default. F2, yeah. And with that enabled, it's just it's a more powerful F function. So you don't really have to fill the first polygon, for example, and you can just start filling like that. And it actually, you can select on this corner and it'll fill diagonally. So it sees these three verts, select this one, hit F, and it'll fill. So yeah, F2 is a pretty important add-on for the retopology workflow. But this kind of got away from me. This is not great topology, but for me, this is absolutely loads better than box modeling any kind of organic shape. So sculpting plus retopology is my go-to organic workflow. And we teach that a lot. So if you watch those courses, you'll be well aware of that workflow. Melvin looks good with a monocle. That's awesome. The monocle, that's great. Cool. All right, so that's kind of all I intended to do. Just scratch the surface of retopology, because you are going to be exposed to that if you go into those courses I recommended. And yeah, that's kind of all that I had. Thanks a lot for the advice. Okay, so F does the fill automatically. Awesome. Okay, thanks. Am I missing anything else? How are you creating those faces so quickly? Matthew Gayton, did I answer your question about creating the faces? The fact that it's filling with F? I'm sorry if I completely breezed over that, but hopefully I answered that for you. Normal flip, yes. Okay, cool. I don't think I'm missing too much. Excellent. All right, well, that's kind of, yeah, that's it for the demo. We can wrap up the stream now. Let's see. I think I had one more stream. Okay, yeah, wrapping up the class. Thank you for attending these live events. It is just one facet of the class overall, but I appreciate you being here. I'm sorry for those of you that this was not a good time slot. I'm open to ideas about changing the time slot, but it's just impossible to please everybody. So for the foreseeable future, it'll remain this. But thank you for watching the recordings if you weren't able to make the live events. But participation was awesome. Lots of people answering each other, and it wasn't just crickets like talking to the wall. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. The class is not done. I do want to say that, even though I'm kind of treating this live stream like it's over, but it's not. You got the full week. I'm going to be still in the community thread, looking very forward to seeing what kind of models you challenge yourself with. And through the weekend, I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. And then maybe Monday next week, Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to do like a final post on the community. And I mentioned, like, I said there would be homework awards as part of this week. I even see it in the name of the stream. But at the very end, when I did that initially, I forgot that the last stream still had a week left behind it, or after it. And so once I see all the homework, I'm going to do some, fun awards and commending you guys with a final post in the community thread. And then, oh yeah, last thing, the new class, I've got it scheduled, or I've got it in my head, and behind the scenes, I've got it scheduled. I've got the outline written. It's going to be creating stylized characters. So it's going to be intermediate to advanced level, but it's going to be really fun where you have a lot of, like, it covers everything. Let me just double check looking at the outline right now. So yeah, it constitutes it analyzes stylized in general, what that means, how to change your brain to think about stylization, and then we talk about character development, actual sculpting, then retopology. We go into that, making production-friendly characters, and then painting. We're going to end with actual texturing techniques, which I'm excited for because that's beyond modeling. It's kind of maybe more of the holistic character workflow. So yeah, that's going to be fun. That's going to be in March. Again, that's intermediate to advanced. So I'm going to be posting that very soon on the site for you guys to RSVP to live events and stuff, and the community thread eventually sometime in February. But yeah, so that's it for the class live event. So thank you so much for being here. You guys are awesome. I look forward to seeing some of you guys again, or, you know,